Perfect. All right. Thank you for tuning in. This is week 4 of Relationship Summer School with yours truly, Coach Brian. It's been a wild day. I have had clients all day, which, that's what I do when I'm not in front of this computer. But I constantly am looking to, better serve and suit others. So for those that get a chance to see me up close and personal behind the scenes, they come to find out that it's a whole different level. So today was crazy, and here we are now. So tonight we're going to dive into one of 2 areas that I believe are very, very key. One of them is very important, and it houses a lot of who we are. But there's an introduction point. The introduction point is what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, the introduction point, it's smaller, but it's the seed. So tonight, we're going to talk about vulnerability factor. It is one of the most important factors that you will have, and it is what makes a difference in your life when getting to develop a relationship. So let's get started. All right. So vulnerability is the core foundation of any relationship. It's the core foundation of any relationship, meaning it's where things started. It's where things get started. It's where things develop. It's where things begin. It is the framework that can either destroy or develop a relationship, meaning that you must determine what this area is so that you can develop what the framework of that relationship is going to be. You must develop this area because it's a core. Vulnerability can be defined as core values because there are areas that you can develop in the inner you, but it's also an area that takes a lot of pure understanding of what you're developing. So vulnerability, it starts from understanding what the vision of the relationship is. Most people will hand over their vulnerabilities to individuals that at the end of the day, they really don't have an understanding of what it means to give their vulnerability to someone. Now, your vulnerability is extremely important because if you just are giving it to anybody, you're not going to be able to develop the right conversations, the right connections with anybody. But knowing what you desire to have in a relationship is very key to determining how the vulnerabilities that you have can be developed into areas of strength, and then being able to build off of that framework to grow into what it is that you're desiring that relationship to go. Now, before we go further, let's define what it means. Vulnerability is the willingness to show emotion or to allow one's weakness to be seen or unknown. Willingness to risk being emotionally hurt. Now, one of the things that I have learned to do in my coaching is that I have learned to take away the weakness aspect of vulnerability that is normally defined as. Because I don't believe in the right setting, a vulnerability is a weakness. I believe it's an opportunity. So let's change the word weakness to opportunity. So let's read it back. Willingness to show emotion or allow one's opportunity to be seen or known. Willingness to risk being emotionally hurt. But in the safe space, it's not a risk to be hurt. It's a risk to be open. So vulnerability is opportunity to be open. Your ability to be open expands your ability to be filled. The more that I'm open about the framework, the more that I have opportunity in the safe space to be filled with information, with moments that will take that vulnerability and create an opportunity for me to grow into what I desire that relationship to be. So when you're open and your desire in a relationship is to grow, when you're open, the right partner is going to bring a feeling. They're going to bring a feeling, and not a feeling of emotion, but a fulfillment. So relationships are to bring a level of fulfillment. And sometimes that fulfillment is not going to come from you. The fulfillment in vulnerabilities, it comes from you in the sense of you are having that opportunity to grow. But sometimes an individual can pour a substance into that area of opportunity that when you go back and look at the ingredients, it actually adds flavor to your ability to grow. Your vulnerability is a cup that identifies who you are. And the one who receives it must be able to allow you to empty it and fill it with a substance that makes that cup better. How many times have you potentially been in a relationship with somebody and you were at a point where you shared something deep with them, and that cup of who you are was emptied of things that you've experienced? You revealed your past pains, your past failures, your successes, your opportunities, what threatened you, where you came from. And instead of that person taking the opportunity to find a way to fill that cup with a solution, they took that opportunity to bring you to a place where they used it to pull you in a direction that you weren't necessarily ready. Your vulnerability is a cup that identifies who you are, and the one that you give it to must be able to allow you to empty it and be able to fill it with a substance that makes that cup better. Meaning, in the development of a relationship, especially a romantic one, the individual must master the art and the skill of, when they get you to open up what's in that cup, show you the ingredients, and say, listen, these ingredients were what you used before. I'm going to add the ingredients of listening. I'm going to add the ingredients of giving you a level of accountability when this area comes up. I'm going to give you a substance of you can talk to me when you feel this particular way so that you can make the right decision. But a lot of times, people leave their cup open to people that they really don't know if they're going to fill that cup with the right substance. Think about this. Think about on the World Wide Web, in the relationship arena, you have a lot of foolishness that's being put out. People are giving advice to vulnerabilities, and people's cups, they're laying it out because they've gone through some stuff. And because they've gone through some stuff, they're revealing the substance, and people are taking that substance, and instead of giving them something quality, they're pouring substance in there that's toxic. Toxic substances are what being produced in people's vulnerabilities, because vulnerabilities are what the framework of what comes out of you when you dive into intimacy. Most people's definition of intimacy becomes toxic in the vulnerability stage. I cannot give you a healthy, intimate space until what I've placed inside the cup of vulnerability is healthy. Whoever has access, whoever you give access to this cup can potentially affect the substance that comes from the cup in the future. Most of the individuals that you see that are out here giving advice that's toxic, they gave their vulnerability to someone that gave them something that was not best. And then intimately, they developed a nature that caused them to produce results from that incorrect substance and a vulnerability. And that's why you have the foolishness that's going on. Give you an example. When we look at the last 50 years of relationships, many men have been pushed to just be providers and not really develop those quality relationships with their mother, those fatherly relationships. So the vulnerability of the toxicity that we're seeing over the last 50 years has been a combination of men not being able to empty out their cup of their pressures and being filled in with the substance of getting out here and working and providing. You're expected as a man to be a provider before you're expected to tell the truth. If I can provide for you, I can omit the truth sometimes. If I can provide for you, then sex is something that I can get because I'm offering you something that is emphasized as needed. But what happens if you take the vulnerability of a man desiring to be a provider and say, he really doesn't have an idea of his vision. So the only thing he knows is provision. The only thing he knows is if I do these things, I'm going to be accepted. So the vulnerability language is acceptance. I want to be accepted. So here's the quickest way to be accepted. Be a provider. Here's the quickest way for me to be accepted. Get out here, make this amount of money. Here's the quickest way to be able to be accepted. Don't open up your mouth and tell the woman that is potentially in your life how you feel. I'm just going to give you what the culture says I'm supposed to do at a man. But as we determined last week, masculinity is not in what you do. It's in the character of who you are. Whoever has access to this cup can potentially affect the substance that comes from this cup in the future. Think about all the music that's getting into people's vulnerabilities and and what they desire from an intimate place is temporary. I'm desiring something temporary in an intimate session. That's why a lot of individuals who are sharing their vulnerabilities, they try to enter the avenue of intimacy or sex without intimacy, because their vulnerability is developed as, well, let me find out about who you are so I can get ultimately what I want from you. When vulnerability is simply an opportunity to add to a person's life. So ask yourself the question, in the past when I've shared my vulnerability, has that person had the capacity to handle what it is that I have determined as an opportunity for me to grow? Or did I just give them information and they had access to the intimacy without a solution? Vulnerability is the solution space. Intimacy needs a solution before it's entered. If I don't bring a solution from vulnerability, then I'm entering into intimacy with no direction and adding no depth. Intimacy is seeing into me that is developed from the vulnerability. It's developing to who you are and the ability to see into them and take what it is that they've developed over the years and growing into the person that they desire to be. You build who you are from the vulnerabilities, but you become the evidence of who that person is through intimacy. Again, vulnerability is not a weakness. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for growth and improvement. One of my vulnerabilities is, for me, I'm Coach Brian, and I'll be honest, I don't like to share what's going on with me at times. Many of my significant others would find out that I don't like to necessarily share what's going on in my world, because I feel as though that there's not very many people that I believe what I will let in that will add. Because to a certain degree, I believe that, hey, maybe the only reason you want to get in is because you want to take advantage of me, because inside of the sharing, there's a kindness that I give. It's like those that I really care about and that I share those things with, I will give them everything that I have as almost a reward because I was able to share. But I had to find out later that I can't give my vulnerability to just anybody. Or if I'm going to give my vulnerability, I need to ration it. And you don't give the full vulnerability to people in the beginning. You don't. There has to be an exchange. There has to be a level of, we're headed in the same direction, and you share. Some people overshare because they have a desire to be accepted. It doesn't work that way. You must have acceptance from yourself. Accept that this is who I have developed to be, and that I'm giving it to you where I am, and that you truly understand that what I'm giving to you is from a place where I desire to grow in this particular area. Everyone does not deserve access to your cup. And it does not matter how much influence they have. I don't care if it's P. Diddy, who may have all the money in the world, or Jay-Z, or Beyonce, or Michael Jordan, or Shaquille O'Neal. Doesn't matter how much influence they have. What matters is, when I share this with you, are you listening? Are you paying attention? Are you willing to add so that I can grow? Or do you just want to know the information because it's available? Some people will only get to know you, just collect your vulnerability and use it against you. Let me give you an example. So recently, I had to let go of a client because, number one, they obviously weren't taking my sessions and the time that I spent seriously. But what happened was, when I told them, hey, I'm letting you go because these are the areas that are not improving, they said out of their mouth, I see why your ex-wife was only married to you for, and I told them to determine the amount of time when we first started talking. I see why your ex-wife was married to you for only this certain amount of time. Now, here's the problem with when in the midst of when people collect your vulnerabilities and you may do something that they may not necessarily like. They'll use information for their own gain and use it against you. And when they insulted me, it was a little bit triggering, because it's not that I care about the fact that I share that with you. It's, you tried to invalidate me based off of a result that I learned from. You tried to invalidate me in that particular aspect, because the reason why our sessions ended was not related to the fact that me and my ex-wife went our separate ways. What we did was what we did, but it has nothing to do with why you are in the position that you're in. Some people will take your vulnerabilities and try to use it against you later, which then will lead to a manipulation aspect that we'll talk about a little bit later. But be very careful who you share your vulnerabilities with, because vulnerabilities potentially mean influence over your life. Vulnerability is the entranceway to intimacy. If intimacy is entered any other way, it will lack depth. How would you feel if a person that you just met had access to your bank account, had access to all your funds, had access to all the money that you have in the bank, but you don't know them? How would you feel? You got $45,000 in the bank, and a complete stranger comes in and has access to it. You'll feel a certain type of way. There's no relationship. Now, if it's your husband, or if it's me, it's my wife, I have $45,000, I'm not gonna feel as bad, because we developed some depth to get to that place. Certain individuals do not have the capacity to handle the entranceway to intimacy. The intimacy is the result of the money that's in the bank. The vulnerability is a passcode to get into my account is the username to get into my account, and it is the access to the funds. The intimacy is the funds, but the access to the funds are the information that opens up the door. What happens a lot of times is that with sex is actually an act of intimacy. Sex without intimacy leads down to a road of information being revealed before it's time, because sex is an exchange. When I exchange and there's no translation of that exchange, expectations are birthed. Believe it or not, sex is a birthing place of expectations. When I have sex with someone and I'm one that, hey, I have a belief that you're going to be this particular way, I have an expectation that you're going to do what you need to do to protect me. But if I'm vulnerable with you, and then I share an intimate moment with you, we have entered into a place where there's a level of depth. But vulnerability is not something that can just be entered into haphazard. It has to be entered into with a element of depth. How deep are you willing to go so that a level of intimacy can grow? You determine who you share your vulnerabilities with. You must choose your vulnerability recipients wisely. I've made that mistake. And that's why, as a coach, when my clients, potential clients, come to me, I let them know from the very, very beginning, your vulnerabilities are not weaknesses. These are opportunities. You can trust me. Who can you trust to lay down the portions of your life and the framework of your life? Who can you trust? Who will you trust? Who can be the recipient of your vulnerability? Who can be the recipient of your vulnerability? You may in this moment even be able to go down your friends list. Ask yourself, who have you shared things with that you can trust? Who are you share things with that you haven't been able to trust? Make sure that when you go down your list, that whoever it is that you share that with, someone not looking to manipulate. Let me tell you something about manipulation. It has happened to me before in many relationships, where I was manipulated to believe that this person cared about me. And I am not one of these men that's out here sleeping around. I'm sorry, I don't do that. I don't. Have I gotten in relationships where sex was involved? It was. But it was a sensitivity and a seriousness that I had. That I didn't just want to be with you because it was like, to me, sex was, man, I'm giving you a very big portion of who I am. And I remember the last real relationship that I was in, I shared some vulnerabilities with this young lady. And to a certain degree, she used to manipulate a result. And when I found this out, I got out. Because vulnerabilities, when they're shared with individuals and you let somebody in, they can influence the way you dress, they can influence the way you view things, they can influence the way you approach things, they can influence. And so you have to be willing to, is this an opportunity that I can trust with someone that really cares about me? Or is it someone trying to manipulate me to live vicariously through me? Anytime manipulation is involved, you are in danger of being injured in the future. You know, one of the things that I take very seriously, because on my platform there are many young ladies that come and they have conversations with me. Many of them that comment, you may even see that. But one of the things that I see is that I have an influence. And because I have influence, I will introduce things from a different angle that most folks probably don't introduce. Because I realize that a lot of times people's choices that they make are from a lack of being vulnerable with those. And so the only way that they believe in being vulnerable is attaching themselves to the masses, attaching themselves to what everybody else thinks. And sometimes people get in spaces where their choices are affected because they're with someone that is manipulating their thought process, is manipulating their ideology, is manipulating their place to look. One of the things that you will always see me do with anything is I will leave a person with the ability to choose. When a person is trying to manipulate you, they're trying to influence you to give a certain result based off of how it benefits you. I tell my clients all the time, the ones that come on, this is an opportunity, but I would never recommend you for services that have you spending money for things that you don't need. I would rather you be in a position where you win and I help you in a short time than to elongate the time for my own benefit, my own gain. He'll bless me with the necessary people that need the time, but it's your future that you're putting me in a position to potentially handle. So I take it upon myself that when vulnerabilities are given to me, I store them away, or I am looking to bring a solution. In this share. So vulnerabilities are a very, very important aspect. They're important because what it does for you is that it lets you know what it is that you really need. I myself, as a coach, and in that process of teaching this course, we got 6 more weeks. In this process of teaching my course, the thing that I wanted to give is I wanted to give each individual the opportunity to understand that relationships can improve, but you got to put in the understanding and the work. Most individuals don't have a good understanding of what vulnerabilities are. They just do stuff that they're used to. They do stuff that they're told to. They do stuff that is introduced to them, but they don't have a good conversation. And they're easily influenced because their feelings are being taught that it's okay to do certain things. They're not taught to feel, but then respond. They're taught to feel and respond. But when you feel, those feelings have to lead you down a road that takes you to a solution. In your vulnerabilities houses where many of your feelings start. My feelings start with my vulnerabilities. Wherever I feel like I am inadequate in, that's the feeling you're going to get out of me. Wherever I feel like I am falling short, that's where my feelings are going to go. Wherever I feel I'm strong in, that's where my feelings are going to go. Wherever I feel like I can do, that's where I'm going to go. Your vulnerabilities are where your feelings begin. Intimacy is where those feelings are either expressed or where those feelings are directed. Intimacy is the result of the conversation that your vulnerabilities have had out loud. So your responsibility as an individual is to make sure that I'm not vulnerable with just anybody. Because vulnerability is where you can either be manipulated or strengthened. You and other young ladies have such a bright future that is going to lead you down a path of understanding and knowing that I can't just be with anybody that I can't trust. And sometimes you share vulnerabilities with an individual, but it's only for a season. Very seldom will you share vulnerabilities with someone for longer than a few seasons of your life. There are some that you're going to be there from more than just a few seasons. They'll be there for quite some time, and they will prove their ability to be trusted. But you have to now determine, in my relationships, who can I be vulnerable with? Who can I trust? Who, in the midst of me growing and I may make a mistake, who's going to be able to handle who I am and what I bring to their life as I'm growing? Now, this week, we dived into vulnerabilities, and I wanted to do a short introduction. A short introduction because it's literally an entrance point. But when we dive into next week, the intimacy factor, I am going to really dive even deeper into what intimacy really is, deeper than what you have probably heard before. Now, I did a video some years ago, and I dived into the intimacy factor. I'm going to dive even deeper than I did on that video. Because as one that has taken upon yourself to invest in yourself, it is necessary that you understand vulnerabilities and why it is the passageway to intimacy. Because intimacy makes up who we are. Vulnerability is where it begins, but intimacy is who we are. Are you ready to be intimate? Intimate with your future. Intimacy means I gotta ask some deeper questions. Intimacy means I gotta know where I'm headed. Intimacy is, who have I shared my life with that wasn't prepared for? Who have I shared my life with? Who have I continuously shared my life with and what I desire to be and who I have become? Because here's the bottom line. People will look at somebody like myself in a different post that I put on Facebook, and they will think that they know me. They will think, oh, you put up this list, you aren't going to be able to get anybody. But a lot of people don't know. I'm a sociologist. I have learned and developed and studied people to the point of where I can get certain hypotheses to go based off of my information. But a lot of people don't know that I study this stuff hours and hours a day. I'm constantly studying content. because the intimate portion of who I am requires that I have information so that I can have a bigger conversation. Intimacy is the conversation that you are able to produce and understand. It's the greater understanding of who you are. It's your ability to translate the understanding of who you are to someone else. And a lot of people, they don't have a great understanding of themselves. So when they speak from an incomplete place. But the building blocks of that come from the vulnerabilities. Wherever you feel inadequate in, it will transfer over to the language that you speak from an intimate place. Discover what your vulnerabilities are. Discover what the opportunities are. And as you start building relationships in the framework of that, understand that the better you build a place from the vulnerabilities, the easier and the better that the intimacy that you give to another person will be clarified. Be very careful who you share these vulnerabilities with. Be very careful. Because people, they want your vulnerabilities. They want who you are before you even develop. People want you to be at a place before you're ready. Some people, they want your heart without your intimacy. They want what you can produce without really getting to know you and why you did it. But next week, we're going to dive so deep into intimacy. And I hope you're ready, because we're going to talk to not only your mind, but we're going to talk to your spirit. And after next week, there may be a point in time that you have even deeper conversation with yourself and determine, I didn't realize how much depth that I had. I didn't realize how much depth that I didn't have. But you're going to begin to understand that when there is a greater level of intimacy and understanding, you will dive into things that you never knew were possible. To get to a greater place of clarity and purpose, you got to understand intimacy. Because when you understand intimacy, you understand you are a lot deeper and a lot more complex than you ever give yourself credit for. So anyway, I want to thank everybody that's going to watch and tune in to this right here, week 4 of Relationship Summer School with yours truly, Coach Brian. The vulnerability factor is the beginning, but next week, the intimacy factor is where we're going to culminate who you really are and how it can become greater as you move forward in your striving and your journey towards healthy and quality relationships. And that's all that I got for now. God bless and have a great night.